Hi, this is Jonathan Smith with the Yakima County Development Association, and I want to walk you through how you document your expenses and how you're using the money that you're getting from the grants that are coming out to your business. So start off with your business. Now, your business, unfortunately, was impacted, either closed or otherwise, by the COVID-19 pandemic. However, since your business has been closed, invoices have continued to stack up, whether it's rent, whether it's utilities, supplies, all of those kind of things just keep adding up. So the federal government knows this, and it's made money available to come to your business. So these dollars, though, are passing through these grant programs. Some of them the Yakima County Development Association is managing. And so how do you document what you're doing with these dollars so that you're meeting what the federal government is intending for the use of these funds? So that's the purpose of this video, and we'll jump right in. We have created this eligible expense certification form. You receive this with the agreement for funding, and other copies of it are available for download on our website. Feel free to just copy this if you need. And we'll walk through exactly what this form has on it, step by step. There's 6 points. Number 1, up at the top, as we look at this, staple the receipt or invoice or other proof of payment for whatever the expense is to this completed form, and then keep it for 7 years. So just hang on to it in case there's an audit, those kind of things. Number 1 question, was the expense incurred between March 27th, and that date's important because that's when the money was officially authorized by the federal government, and November 15th, 2020? Yes. And if you circle no, it says right next to it, if no, then this expense is not eligible. The second one is we describe how the expense is connected to the COVID-19 emergency. Money can only be used for things that are connected to the COVID-19 emergency. Number 3, how is the expense necessary to continue your business's operations? We'll go a little bit more into detail later on how to answer those. But continuing on the form, number 4, is the expense filling a shortfall in government revenues? In other words, are you paying directly for taxes, licenses, state, county, federal fees? Yes, if you circle yes, it says right there, if yes, this expense is not eligible, the money can't be used to fill a shortfall in government revenues. So over here, the answer no can be circled. And the last 2, 5 and 6, are self-attesting. You're self-attesting that the expense is not being funded by any other funder, whether it's a private, state, or federal source. You sign and date. And then you're also attesting that you're only requesting assistance with the expense because your business has been impacted by COVID-19. And so we're going to walk through each of those 6 points one by one. Was the expense incurred between March 27th, 2020 and November 15th, 2020? You may be thinking to yourself, if I had rent payments that came up in April, May, June, July, and I've already paid them, how can I use this money to pay for them? Because I've already paid for them. So we're going to talk about that and how you can use this money for anything that is in between those dates. So remember this, how the money flows from the government through a program to help pay for those invoices that have been piling up. So we're going to focus on those invoices. We're going to drill into those a little bit deeper, spread those out, and give them a name. So let's say we have August, September, October, November, and December rent payments. And you've already paid for August, and you've already paid for September. You know you're going to have October, you know you're going to have November, and you know you're going to have December. Well, December is out because it's after November 15th. But what about these other ones? You've already paid August and September. What do? Well, you simply staple that invoice for August that you've already paid to this form, and that covers whatever that dollar amount is for the dollars that you received. You can do the same with September. When you pay October, you can attach it, and when you pay November, you can attach it. So you don't have to have a separate form for every single invoice. You could have one form that covers all your rent. You could have another form that covers all of your payroll. You could have another form that covers all of your utilities, etc. And it doesn't matter if you've already paid the invoice or if you pay the invoice with the money. You can still attach that to the document, to the certification form. So that's what I mean by was the expense incurred between March 27th, 2020 and November 15th, 2020. So if you have an expense of rent that you've incurred between those dates, you can just attach it to that form. The next one is how you got to describe how the expense is connected to the COVID-19 emergency. And the third one is very similar. You explain how the expense is necessary to continue business operations. So this is actually where you have to write something out and kind of make an explanation of how the money is connected to COVID-19 and how it's helping you to continue your business operations. So we're going to walk through a couple of examples. And since we just looked at rent for the previous one, we're going to start with that. Here's rent or mortgage. And on the form, you would say, I had to close the doors, but I still had my regular ongoing fixed expenses of rent. So how is the expense connected to COVID-19 emergency? You said you had to close the doors because of it. How is the expense necessary to continue business operations? You needed to keep, the answer here, I needed to keep my rent current so that I would have a place to operate my business when I could reopen. So obviously looking at that, it seems like this is too obvious, right? It can't be that simple. It is. You had to close the doors because of COVID. That's how it's connected. You need to pay your rent, obviously, so you can operate your business in the future. That's how it's necessary. It's as simple as that. Next example is payroll. You kept some employees on part-time during the pandemic, so you did not have to completely close your business. So that's how it's related to COVID-19. You're under restrictions or under some kind of thing with the COVID-19, but you're keeping employees on. So how is the expense necessary? Well, if you closed completely, you would have lost customers who would have shopped online. My business would not have been able to make it. Obviously, this is going to be unique to each business, but basically it is necessary to keep employees. You could even say, if I don't keep my employees, I could lose them to a competitor. Whatever the situation is that's true for you as to why you needed to, continue to keep employees on during the pandemic. We'll look at COVID-19 example. And there's all these requirements of social distancing and having things set up, with shields and separations and barriers. So anything that you spent money on to do that is eligible. So if you had to this example, we says, how is it connected to the emergency? I had to rework how my business was set up to comply with social distancing. I had to buy gloves, masks, shields, and all these other materials to meet the social distancing requirements. How is it necessary to continue business operations? Well, without making those expenses and purchasing all the masks, gloves, and other materials, would not have been able to open and be compliant with the state guidelines. So that's why those were necessary. And you could take a big stack of those purchases that you made, the receipts, and just staple them to this form. Next example that we're going to look at is utilities, very similar to rent. How it's connected to COVID-19. Had no revenue coming in because of COVID-19, but I still had to pay my utility bills. Well, how is paying utility bills necessary to continue operations? Again, it seems too easy of an answer to be all that's required, but yeah, you need to keep up my utilities current so that they would still be on when I could reopen my business. So the last example we'll look at is supplies and inventory. So how is it connected to the COVID-19 emergency? So we say my business was partially closed, but I need to continue to operate even though revenues coming in didn't always cover the cost of having the supplies and inventory needed to be partially open. And this goes back to kind of the uncertainty. Even if you're partially open, customers are behaving differently because of COVID-19. You maybe purchase things that are perishable, and in the normal times, you would have sold those, but because of COVID-19 and the uncertainty, maybe some of it perished, etc. So how is this expense necessary to continue business operations? I needed to keep a good enough selection of inventory and have enough supplies to operate through the pandemic, even with the reduced hours and restrictions. So that's what we're looking for when we're saying how we describe the expenses connected to COVID-19 emergency, and also how the expense is necessary to continue business operations. The next one there was, is the expense filling a shortfall in government revenues, such as paying directly for taxes, licenses, state, county, federal, or city fees? So this can be a little confusing, so we'll go back to our original example, except for this time, the money goes the other way. Businesses have to pay taxes, so payroll taxes for employees, income taxes for the business, B&O taxes to the state. You have to buy licenses sometimes, you have to pay fees. If you are paying money directly to the government, you're on the check that you're writing, it's to the Washington State Department of Revenue, or it's to the federal government, whoever, then that is not an eligible expense, because you're essentially using tax dollars to pay your taxes with, which defeats the purpose. They want you to use this money to keep your business going. So you may be asking, well, wait a minute, when I buy some things for my business, sometimes I have to pay sales tax on that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about when you're directly paying the taxes that your business owes. So that's what is not eligible. So that's what we mean by filling a shortfall in government revenues, such as paying directly for taxes, licenses, fees, those things. Now we're into the self-attesting ones. And the first one is a little confusing. You're self-attesting that this expense, whether it's rent, utility, payroll, is not funded by any other funder, whether private, state, or federal. So again, we're going to jump back and look at our original example, where dollars are coming from the government through a program like one of the ones YCDA is administrating to your business. However, there are other funding programs other than just the YCDA ones. There's the Paycheck Protection, there could be other grant programs, and so dollars could be coming to your business to help you with these invoices you've incurred from multiple sources. So we'll take another look at these invoices. And here's the example that we had before. December obviously was out, and even though you'd already paid August and September rent, you could still attach them to this form. But what if you've gotten money also from the Paycheck Protection Program or other grants? That's fine, as long as you don't do the following, which is, you can see here, we claimed September to this program. We've got it attached to this form, but we also told the Paycheck Protection Program that we were paying rent with the money they gave us for September. And we also told these other grants that we were paying September rent with that money. So that doesn't work because we're using the exact same expense for multiple grant programs. When I say the exact same expense, I mean the individual invoice. So it is allowable to do this. You can see here that August is attached to this form. September is only attached to the Paycheck Protection Program. It's not going to two different areas anymore. October is only attached to this other grant program, and November is attached to this grant again. So as long as each of them are coming from a different source, you're okay. Because otherwise, the federal government is looking like they're paying you multiple times so that you can cover the same expense that you incurred because of COVID. So as long as those are separate, you're good to go. And if you haven't gotten any other grants or you haven't gotten anything from the Paycheck Protection Program, you don't need to worry about this. But if you did, pay close attention because you want to make sure that you're not, they call it double dipping, or using federal money from two different sources to pay for the exact same expense. That's how we're meeting the self-attest that this expense is not funded by any other funder. And the last one now is we self-attest that we're only requesting assistance with this expense because your business was impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So what does that mean to be impacted? If you were closed because of COVID-19, if you were partially closed because of COVID-19, or if you lost revenue because of COVID-19, then your business has been impacted. And so that is the 6 steps to determining if an expense is eligible. If it meets all of those, you're good to go. Attach it to that document. As it says up there, staple it to the document and then keep it for 7 years so that you have a record of that. If there's ever an audit or something like that, you can just easily produce this and say, yep, I used these dollars to help my business survive the pandemic in ways that met all of the criteria that was outlined. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our office, the Yakima County Development Association, 575-1140. Visit us on the web, chooseYakimaValley.com. That certification form, you'll be able to download copies of it online as well. Thanks.